going to call the meeting to order. The full authority agenda. Okay. Board members, staff, guests, and members of the public are reminded that the full authority board committee meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the authority's website along with the official written minutes. As such, comments and opinions expressed may be published, and any comments expressed by individual board members, guests, and the general public are their own and do not represent the opinions or comments of the full authority and/or the KCCA Board of Directors. The recorded video of the full authority meeting is not considered the official record of that meeting. The official record of the full authority meeting shall consist solely of the minutes approved by the full authority. So, welcome everyone. Sorry for the delay. Do we have any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Let's go to the minutes of the February 6th full authority meeting. It was in your package. Any comments, questions at all? If not, looking for someone to pass. Ralph? Okay. All in favor? Carried. Sorry, Allison.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, you got that? And the February 20th general meeting, which, by the way, I want to congratulate staff and everybody for such a wonderful, wonderful experience. That was great. Did a great job. So we're very proud, very proud of KCCA that day. So well done. So we have the minutes of that meeting. Linda and Joe. All in favor? Perfect. Okay, those are passed. Okay, so now we've got the media report.
Mr. Chair, in the interest of time, I'll do the media report as well as the March project tracking. As noted, we've been hiring for our seasonal staff. Mary Ann posted on social media with over 13,000 people viewing those postings, so we had a good turnout for that. Spellbound is coming up. We're hoping that KCCA board team will get organized, and Stephen, I think, is going to try to lead that. All our seasonal camper payments are in for 2019. We have 25 seasonal sites available and well over 30 new seasonal applications, so there's a great amount of interest in those seasonal sites this year. Our new forestry and lands technician position is hired and commenced on March 11th. And Cliff's been very busy doing some online applications, including a reference form, timesheet, and occurrence reports. So those are great initiatives, reducing the amount of paper that's circulating around the authority. That's it for the media and project tracking.
Excellent, thank you very much. So we need to, do we need to receive
So,
those?
motion to receive.
Motion to receive, Linda, Allison, all in favor? Thank you, carried. Okay, so let's take a look at the watershed conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just really quickly, February and March, I thought I would put up a little hydrograph just so people could, members could see what the water flows were like in the watershed. You can see in February where we had our ice jam, where the water levels were the highest. We had a little high water event due to rain and snow melt at the end of February, and the March break we had some snow melt and rain, but just kind of slowly went out of the system, which is kind of nice. We did have a pretty good wind warning at the end of February, but because of ice cover in the lake, it didn't result in very much problems down in Fort. And yeah, so far so good. Spring is finally good.
Is that official?
As of today, yes.
Thank you very much. Any questions at all, folks? Seeing none, could I get a motion to receive the report? Yes, Joe, all in favor? Thank you. Okay. And the Elgin Clean Water Program, you're in.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was included in your package and basically just highlights the success of the Elgin Clean Water Program over the last year, especially for those municipalities within Elgin County. We did 45 projects this year, and you can see the types of projects broken out there. Wetland projects continue to be a big seller for us, and this was the first year we funded cover crops, so over 500 acres of cover crops were planted. through assistance that we provided, keeping cover on the land over the winter.
Good. Any questions? Linda?
Just a quick comment, just congratulations back. I mean, some wonderful projects out there. Went around and seen some of them and checking them out, and some of the pictures that you've sent along as well. So congratulations, and I'm glad to see the community participating the way they are. We're getting a good name on this one. So I'm just passing along my congratulations.
Well done, excellent. Okay, so let's have a motion to receive that report. Ralph and Allison, all in favor? Thank you. Okay, correspondence. Conservation Ontario, 2019 Ontario Budget Consultation Submission.
Mr. Chair, I think that was self-explanatory, and there's no additional correspondence.
Okay, so a motion to receive that correspondence. Joe, Allison, all in favor? Thank you. We're just whipping through this. Awesome. New business. We're doing statement of revenues, right?
No, there's no statement this month.
Okay, perfect. And new business, personnel policy update.
Mr. Chair, this is basically housekeeping, really, as a result of the Ontario Bill 47 that repealed some of the employment standards initiatives under Bill 148. So primarily, it affected our overtime policy. So basically, the bill repealed that workers would be paid at least 3 hours work, even if they are not called back in, if they're on call status. So I corrected that in our policy, as well as the leaves of absence. So if you remember with Bill 148, all workers got 10 sick days, and that's been repealed and replaced with 3 unpaid sick leave days, 3 unpaid family leave days, and 2 unpaid bereavement days. And those corrections have been made in the updated policy as well.
Any questions about that at all, folks? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve as updated? Dennis, thank you. And Joe, all in favor? Thank you. Well done. Outdoor smoking policy.
Mr. Chair, so this is a new policy that the staff is putting forward for the board's consideration. The motion I've just updated slightly, so it's on the screen, that effective May 1st, 2019, smoking be limited to registered campsites and designated parking areas at Lake Whitaker and Dalewood Conservation Areas as outlined in the updated 2019 rules and regulations. This refers to the fact that what we're looking at in terms of a smoking policy is that smoking would be limited to your registered campsite and any of the smoking areas that are set up within the campgrounds. The reason staff are putting forward this is that smoke-free policies, there's a lot of value behind smoke-free policies. There's decreased fire risks, substantial litter control within the conservation areas, consistent enforcement of all forms of smoking, which is important as we look at marijuana being legalized in the province as well. Similar policies have been in place or been introduced at Upper Thames River Conservation Authority. This will be their first year going smoke-free. And Essex Region was the leader and has been out for a couple of years now. So we're looking at no smoking in 2019 at Dalewood and Lake Whitaker conservation areas, and considering expansion to other areas based on the response and success of the program this year to other conservation areas under our jurisdiction. Under the policy, we would define smoking and vaping as outlined in the Smoke-Free Ontario Act. So smoking means smoking, inhaling and exhaling, holding lighted tobacco or cannabis, medical or recreational. Vaping means inhaling or exhaling vapor from an electronic cigarette, e-cigarette, or holding an activated e-cigarette, whether or not the vapor contains nicotine. And smoking and vaping is limited to permitted campsites and designated smoking areas and parking lots. Designated smoking areas are signed and identified on campground maps. So really, there shouldn't be a great amount of change from our existing policies, other than people wouldn't be able to walk down the roadways in the campgrounds and smoke. We would be limiting it to their campsite. In terms of communicating, we have a plan that was outlined within the advance report, including emails to existing seasonal campers as well as campers that have already registered for camping in 2019. Those who have registered and are happy with the new policy would be provided the opportunity to have their camping refunded for the year. It would be updated on the website as well, news releases, social media, and signage. In terms of where those designated smoking areas would be within the campground, they're highlighted in the orange areas there. Already kind of public spaces, usually denoted in our parking lots. So we have one up by the pool area, one in the main area, and one down by what we would classify as group camping. And this map is Dalewood Conservation Area. Then at Lake Whitaker, a slightly larger campground, but again, the same idea, designated smoking areas within the public parking spaces. So one pretty much located in each of the main areas, and then one at the entrance area as well. The no smoking, no vaping signs, we're working with the, we're proposing to work with the health unit. They can provide the signage free of charge, so we would be getting those. The only other thing we thought of is these type of smoking canisters or ashtrays to be placed at the smoking areas to control litter and further designate where their smoking areas are. So unless there's any questions, the motion is before you.
Linda, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm curious if some of the other authorities are going to smoke free. I'm going to assume that they would have a designated area, but not on campgrounds, right?
Yeah, so this policy that we put in place is very similar to what Essex and Upper Towns have already.
So are they
dictated.
smoking on campsites as well?
Yes.
They are. And I have to ask, how is that possible unless they're inside their unit, that's not exposing children and others to smoke?
It's certainly not a perfect policy,
Yes.
but it's a step forward. I know that, some of the things that we can look at is designating other areas within the campgrounds where campsites would be smoke-free.
Mhm.
And so that's what we would look at in the further stages of this program. But right now, as a first step, we're limiting smoking to the campsites.
Okay, I'm okay with this. I struggled with it a little bit. I find that outdoor areas are just that. They're no different than playgrounds, and you can't stop people from walking through your space
Right.
outside. So you can't monitor it. I mean, it's just not possible for staff to do that kind of, monitoring around. So we will come back to this in 1 year.
Yes.
All right. I'm okay with that, I guess, as long as we're coming back to it 1 year, because I do think we should be smoke-free and then be in those designated areas. I don't want somebody coming back and saying, I was on campsite such and such, or went by and could smell this and that. And I don't want to get into that legalese that's going to happen. It's going to happen. So, temporary, 1 year, okay.
What are the steps in enforcement then?
Yeah, I think that was outlined in the report as well. I think what we find with similar things that we've introduced at the campground, that the first step would be education. So if we spot someone smoking where they're not supposed to be, educate them why we have the policy where they can smoke. If we have repeat offenders, then we'd be looking at enacting our zero tolerance policy, which has a range of consequences for unacceptable behavior. So we might look at a verbal warning, first written warning, second written warning, all the way up to.
Even with the introduction of cannabis and such into the process, it doesn't change that.
It's going to smell nice in the campsite.
No, I think the way the zero tolerance policy is written is that it's a tool that staff have the ability to escalate up a sequence depending on the severity of the.
I was just thinking more along the neighbors and that kind of stuff, and because of the not necessarily agreement with that, right?
Right.
So it's a different kind of.
I think what Joe's pointing out is we look at quantity of the infraction as well. So if we have someone smoking cannabis within 200 meters of the playground,
Right.
we're going to take that more seriously than in another area of the campground. But the zero tolerance policy allows for that.
Okay.
Curious, has there ever been a request for a smoke-free campsite? Does anybody know if there, does anybody ask if there's a smoke-free area?
Not a question received.
Okay.
I think from discussions with the coordinators in the park, one of the biggest issues is going to be that when the campers go for a walk, like the smart water walking.
Yeah.
That'll probably be the biggest enforcement issue or education process that we anticipate.
Mhm.
I just want to comment too. I think the idea of putting the ashtrays in the parking areas is a really good idea, because if you have a place for people to dispose of, more than likely, anybody that's got the mindset they want to spend the weekend camping is hopefully looking to keep the campsite clean, and obviously, it's just a good idea, I think.
Any other discussion, questions at all? Okay, looking for a motion then to accept this. Allison, seconder, Joe?
Okay, can I have it noted that it will be reviewed in 1 year? It's not noted anywhere, but I'd like it noted, please.
Can you put that into the motion?
Okay.
Okay, so we've added that to the motion then?
Thank you very
To be
much.
reviewed in a year. Okay, any comments on that? Okay, let's take a vote. All in favor? Thank you, carried. Okay, the forest cover loss policy gap.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have a fairly lengthy motion for consideration of the board today, but if I could quickly address it. As everyone's aware, in our planning and regulations program, our primary mandate is focused on compensating on natural hazard-related issues with development. Natural heritage matters, dealing with the environment and protection. We have the ability under our MOUs with the province to provide that service to our municipalities if we have service agreements in place. In 2006, by motion, our board passed or directed staff not to be involved in natural heritage-related comment matters unless service agreements are in place with our municipalities. We currently only have one service agreement with the County of Middlesex through a multi-agency conservation authority agreement. However, as we kind of walk through some of our planning training, one avenue is we still are an environmental resource management agency that we can provide recommendations or request consideration of certain matters to our planning approvals under development applications under the Planning Act. One thing we've recently realized is most of our municipalities in our watershed have woodlands conservation bylaws or tree cutting bylaws. Under those bylaws, if there's tree clearing or certain large amounts of woodlands being removed, there's a requirement for compensation. So there's no net loss policies. One thing we've realized through the planning process is that if there's approval for the loss of vegetation cover for a planning and development application under the Planning Act, that exempts them from having to apply under the woodland conservation bylaw. And what we've seen then is the requirement for compensation hasn't been being consistently applied to Planning Act approvals. So this is something that, as a result, after having our 2018 report card that shows that we're actually losing forest cover faster than we can recreate it, we've been having these discussions about how we can provide comments and advocate to our municipalities about the need to at least require compensation in these situations. The one that's jumped out most to us now, and we want to start commenting, is a development application we've been circulated on in Port Stanley that results in 10 acres of vegetation removal. So we're not involved in reviewing the ES as to whether staff support or not support the loss of the cutting of that vegetation removal, but we think we want to raise the attention to our approval authorities that at least we should be asking for compensation. So if the planning and development application approves the loss of 10 acres of woodlands, we want to ask the planning authorities to require as condition of approval that the developers be required to offset that loss.
What would compensation be?
At this point, we're just advising that they should at least consider the requirements of their own woodland bylaw. So for Elgin County, my understanding is it's based on basal area. There's certain calculations they do that determine how many trees or how many acres of land have to be compensated. So we're not necessarily we're not asking for the board to identify what the compensation needs are, but in the motion, what we're looking for board endorsement is that so we can start advocating through our planning and development comments that the municipalities or the county, whoever the approval authority is, consider at a minimum compensation of those woodland losses based on their own woodlands conservation bylaw requirements. So the motion that we had written for consideration of the board is considering that KCCA is an environmental resource management agency committed with its member municipalities to improve the overall forest cover in Kettle Creek watershed. And whereas KCCA's 2018 watershed report card grades the current forest cover in the watershed as poor to fair, and that the rate of forest cover loss is 7.32 hectares per year based on 2015 aerial photography. And whereas it is our understanding that local woodlands conservation or tree cutting bylaws within our watershed offer a no net loss policy for woodlands clearing, but provide exemptions for destruction of trees imposed as a condition of development approvals under the Ontario Planning Act. that Kettle Creek Conservation Authority hereby recommend to all Planning Act approval authorities within its watershed that consideration be given to providing for all development applications approved under the Ontario Planning Act that result in the loss of forest cover to be required to offset or provide woodlands compensation consistent with their local woodland conservation or tree cutting bylaws.
Linda?
Okay, so, just going through tree bylaws, trees are on our minds these days. We didn't finish our conversation at St. Thomas the other day. Joe, I get this, I'm just not sure, I'm a little hesitant to say that it's maybe not tough enough. When I see loss, loss is loss, right? Compensation is not, that's why I'm asking you about compensation, right? That still is considered canopy loss.
Right.
So I'm a little worried about that does not give that message clear enough that replacement needs to be done somewhere. So we got into a bit of discussion actually the other night about could we do it somewhere else? Could recovery of trees, not recovery of trees, planting of trees, a new lot, whatever, be done somewhere else? And that would be at the expense of whoever it is that wishes to take it out, be it a developer or whatever.
Correct.
So I would much prefer wording in here that says we're not gonna lose canopy. We're gonna look for a solution to either replace it somewhere else
Right.
or do something along those lines. Compensation to me means loss, and that's not what we're supposed to be about. We're already in the poor category, which bothers me a lot because we're not making as much headway as what I thought we would. So I'm just putting it out there, Chair, that I would prefer wording that says that compensation should be replacement or in another area, something along those lines.
Do we have the authority to do that?
Yeah, so one thing is we're asking consideration to approval authorities because we can't require draft conditions without a service agreement. But one thing we were careful in the wording, and maybe Jeff can correct me if I'm wrong, but specifically related to the Elgin County Woodlands Conservation Bylaw, it's based on a certain area calculation of trees lost, and I believe there's two avenues that they have the ability to. They can either replant on their own lands, or they can provide a cash donation to a tree planting organization to replant somewhere else in the watershed to cover that. No, I believe it's a no net loss policy. So
Okay,
whatever
no
they
net
take
loss
out,
makes
they
more
replace.
sense to me,
Yeah,
okay.
and that's kind of noted in the third paragraph of the motion, that it's our understanding the local bylaws have a no net loss policy, but it's exempt under approvals of the Planning Act. So all we're trying to do is encourage our approval authorities to apply the requirements of their own bylaws under Planning Act approvals.
I have a question. So us putting this in place, does this match up with any other conservation authorities and the actions of them, or are we leading the way, or are we sort of coming into compliance?
I'm not too familiar with what the other CAs here, but there's certainly different hierarchies of what services the CAs provide to the municipalities. So some, like for instance, Upper Thames have ecologists and biologists on staff, or they may have service agreements to provide advisory services to the municipality on natural heritage policies in the province. We don't have that.
Right.
What we're saying here is we've realized with our 2018 report card is we're losing forest cover. Meanwhile, we're participating with our municipalities, and our municipalities are funding our tree planting program to maintain and increase forest cover. A couple of points that the report card noted is I believe we have a 14% forest cover in our watershed, which is well below the 30% recommended average. So there's lots of municipal decisions and partnerships with the Conservation Authority where we're all committed to that protection of forest cover. We've just seen, why we reference a policy gap, we've seen a gap where the municipality's bylaws require compensation, but approvals under the Planning Act exempt them from having to apply under those bylaws. And for whatever reason, the requirement for compensation or maintaining no net loss under Planning Act approvals is somehow being overlooked. So we just want to raise the attention to those planning approval authorities, and with the board's endorsement, then staff can start advocating for that in our commenting letters when we comment on planning and development applications. And I'd say this development, based on my experience and review, this development is relatively unique due to the scale of vegetation loss. I think in most cases we see little tribute gully feature fingers cut off or the edge cut back. But with this one, we actually see I believe an 8-acre woodlands clearing. And so it was kind of the one that triggered that we need to escalate the discussions we're having at the staff level and seek board endorsements so that we can comment on these. Again, through the planning process, we'd be commenting as an environmental agency requesting consideration, not requiring draft conditions. So then it would be, in this case, it'd be the county of Elgin's discretion whether or not they require that or not. But at least we're raising it and bringing awareness to the concern.
And I just think as somebody through reading a report, seeing that on the report would make you, again, be aware of that and look into it a little bit more. You know, it's just a reminder that that needs to be taken care of. And if it's not there, then you might just not even think about it.
I'm just gonna ask, do the municipalities take this seriously or not?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I think that, you know, when I hear about the 8 acres, I'm like cringing, like, I'm sure that the developments.
Where are they putting this? But
Yeah,
that's
you know, I'm looking at 8 acres, that's a lot to lose in
That is.
mature trees, and what is the ratio that you plant? You would know better than I, that if you're losing one mature tree, how many trees does it take to cover the loss of that? So I think it's important that it's in there, because we definitely need to think about it.
I think it's just the public outcry that would come from cutting down 8 acres of trees.
Well, we had this just down the road, not that long ago, where a protected forest was devastated. Just the other side of the Tim Hortons there. You know, the lot is up for sale. Well, he'd gone in and clear cut it, and so it was too late. It was too late. But what was the penalty for that,
Before me.
right? There was no
The
penalty.
city didn't have a tree cutting bylaw at the
Right.
time.
Which is why we're doing what we're doing.
Right.
Rob?
Chatham, Kent, which doesn't apparently have a tree cutting bylaw at all, and you drive down 401 and see the number of bush areas that have been cleared in the last 5 to 10 years, it's incredible. And apparently they have no policy at all, as far as I know.
So, but this motion reads as a recommendation to those of us that have a tree cutting bylaw that we follow it.
Right.
And I think in most cases we would. I don't know where Central Elgin is in this one, but for it's a suggestion.
Correct.
However, a pretty good motherhood suggestion that we follow our own tree bylaw should we come to a case where we have a large wood lot that's being cut in order to do something. We've been spending a lot of time on the one-offs or the two-offs, but our bylaw is for everything, right? So I think if we ran into this, I think you're right, buried in the planning act, there's an exception to it, but I don't know, is it being taken that often?
Well, I think more it's, like, even in this case, environmental impact studies had to be completed by the
Right.
developer. They've reviewed it, they provided justification why it can be removed, but what we're not seeing is the requirement for compensation. And in the Elgin County Woodlands Conservation Bylaw, we know there's a specific exemption written in the bylaw, because it's assumed that it's been evaluated through the Planning Act, then the bylaw has been addressed, but what we're seeing is that requirement for compensation not being included in the draft conditions.
Well, see, we have the requirement for compensation, and in our newest one, it's there and pretty firm. So I'm not certain that there's a planning exception in St. Thomas, but you've now triggered my brain to go see
Yeah,
that as a planning.
and to be fair, there may not be.
Right.
We wanted to make sure that we did this watershed wide. So we
Right.
didn't want to focus on one municipality or something
And so
else.
this is a recommendation from this group to all of its members.
All of our planning
municipalities.
authorities.
Hey, remember, if you have a compensation piece or a requirement to replace piece,
Right.
follow
Correct.
it. Okay, I'm okay if that's what this motion says.
That's all we're asking them to do is consider and implement their decisions under the
If you
plan.
have it, do it.
Dennis?
I like the idea of this recommendation, because what this is doing, that currently, every municipality is paying for replanting of trees through the Kettle Creek. This actually get the developers, put some teeth into it, so where the developers being charged, or should be charged or compensated towards tree
If
planting.
they were farming the land and wanted to clear cut it, they would have to go to the county, they would have to offset the loss.
Yeah.
Under the Planning Act, we're just not seeing that requirement being implemented.
Okay, excellent. Good. Any other discussion at all? Wonderful. That was great. Good, great comments. Okay, so we have a recommendation. We need a mover and a seconder. Ralph, Dennis, all in favor? Thank you. Carried.
Good policy, good policy.
That's good. Step forward. Planning and Regulations Activity Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, that was circulated in your advance package, just looking for receipt of the permits and planning act approvals that have been released by staff.
Okay, looking for a motion. Linda and Allison, all in favor? Thank you. Well done. Okay, so that's the main agenda. Time to move into closed session. Motion, Linda,
Thank you all for all your
Allison, thank you. Motion to close session.
No problem. Quick.
Okay, so we're now back in open session. We have a motion to go into open session. Linda and Joe, all in favor? Thank you. Okay, we're now in open session. So we have
And I move the recommendation.
recommendation. Now, we need to do the minutes first.
Yes.
Okay, Dennis,
Yeah.
Joe, all in favor of the minutes?
Yeah.
Thank you. And then recommendations Linda makes.
Yep.
Okay, Allison is seconding it. All in favor? Thank you. That looks like adjournment time.
I'll
Any
make that
other?
motion.
Thank you.
Yeah, did we want to go back to the water source protection?
Are we good?
We have 5 minutes. I can, we have to do an election, but I can make it happen.
Take it home.
You want?
I can pull it up if you want me to start.
If I end up being 5 minutes late for my needles, I'm not gonna cry about
Okay, there's a couple jokes, I'm just going to.
it. Just like, oh.
So according to regulations, we do have to do an elections for the Source Protection Authority. So what I was going to do was, I'm going to ask for a motion that I act as chair until, for the purposes of conducting the election. So if I can have a mover and seconder for that. Ralph and Allison. So the election of chair and vice chair of the Kettle Creek Source Protection Authority for 2019 will be conducted in accordance with Conservation Authorities Act. I'll ask for the appointment of 2 scrutineers. If I could suggest that we have Kathleen and 1 member of the authority that's not going to be considered for chair or vice chair.
We all throw our hands up.
That's
Okay,
Don't all
Linda.
volunteer at the same time.
So if I could have a motion that Kathleen Sebastian Scott and Linda Stevenson act as scrutineers and that the ballots be destroyed
unanimous. Was
after.
your hand the highest? What happened?
I was quick, you ignored me.
I do.
Need a motion, folks.
Can I have a mover and a seconder? Allison and Joe?
I'm not in favor.
I declare the motion carried. The election shall be conducted in the following order. First for chair and second for vice chair. I'll call for nominations 3 times. I now call for the nominations for the position of chair for the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority for 2019, Source Protection Authority for 2019.
I'll nominate Steve.
Yeah, Stephen, it typically is our chairs.
Yes, please don't make my life complicated.
Yeah.
Let's have an election.
It's typically a chair and vice chair.
Yeah.
I call a second time for nominations for the position of chair. And a third and final time for nominations for the position of chairs. I request a motion to close the nominations for chairs. Ralph and Linda, all in favor?
Didn't even get asked.
Those opposed? Carried.
Good to see.
I didn't have an opportunity to
It was
refuse.
the best speech you've ever done.
Will you allow your name to speak?
Yes, I will. It's all ego, right? Yeah, there you go.
So seeing no other nominations, I would declare you acclaimed as chair.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Incredible.
And Grant's not here, so we're gonna do it anyway.
Yes. I now call for the nominations for the positions of vice chair for Kettle Creek Source Protection Authority for 2019.
I'll put Grant's name forward, please.
Okay.
I've heard Grant say yes.
Yeah.
It may have been on a different topic, but I have heard it.
Yes, he has.
I'll call for a second time for nominations for vice chair. And a third and final time for nominations for vice chair. Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion for nominations to be closed. Dennis, and I saw Allison.
Yep.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And Grant did let his name stand, and I
He's a
congratulate
good
him.
guy.
Perfect.
Yeah.
He's a good man. He's a good man.
He's won another election.
So we just just have I'll turn the office back over to the chair. And we have some administrative approvals that I would appreciate. So the first one being that our signing officers be chair or vice chair, the general manager, or the assistant manager.
So moved. Or do we have to have approval on that?
Joe and
All in favor? Carried.
And then we just need a borrowing one, so the suggestion is that for all expenditures in 2019 be $10,000, and further that signing officers be authorized to execute if necessary the document.
Ralph, Linda, all in favor? Carried.
That the firm of Graham Scott Ends be appointed the auditors for 2019.
Linda, Dennis, all in favor? Thank you. Carried.
That the firm of Inglis, Price & Ewer be appointed solicitors for 2019.
Okay, need a motion there, Allison and Joe, all in favor? Thank you.
Now we have the minutes, and I'm asking for 3 motions there, that the minutes of the Source Protection Authority of October 17th be approved.
Okay, Linda and
Ralph, you
Allison,
were there?
Sure.
all in favor? Carried.
That the minutes of the Source Protection Committee, December 6th and October 4th be received.
And we look for a motion, Linda and Ralph, all in favor? Thank you.
And finally, that the Management Committee meeting of October 16th be received.
Linda and Ralph, all in favor? Thank you.
So that takes us to their first item of business. Again, really housekeeping here. We have a partnership agreement, which is really a memorandum of understanding between all 4 of the Geary CAs to form a source protection region. That original agreement was formed in 2004 and updated in 2007. It outlines the responsibilities and duties of the lead source protection authority, as well as the cooperation between all 4 CAs to prepare the source protection plans. If returning members remember, there's an update on July 1st, 2018 relative to some increased responsibilities for the Source Protection Authority. So this just means that the drinking water systems owners must now ensure that work to access the vulnerability of a new or expanding drinking water system is completed and accepted by the Source Protection Authority before that work can occur. So the local Source Protection Authority must issue a notice to the system owner. So those were just increased responsibilities that came into effect in 2018, and through discussion at the Regional Management Committee, we felt that those increased duties needed to be reflected in the agreement. And so that is the sole change that has happened to the agreement, and I'm asking for permission today to execute that document with the other 4 CAs.
So moved.
Linda, mover, Ralph, seconder, all in favor? Thank you. Okay, carried.
And that's it for business. Just
Yay.
adjournment.
Wow. Looking for a motion to adjourn?
Look at that.
Okay, nobody wants to.
Sure.
Okay, Allison and Joe.
Excellent. Thank you.